Hello, thank you for choosing to watch a New Life video. I'm Matt with New Life Church, and we're continuing our study of the Hall of Faith listed in Hebrews. Today we're continuing the story of Joseph. We're picking it up at Genesis chapter 39. Last week in the lesson, he was blatantly favored by his father, given this coat of many colors, and he was the person who squealed about his brothers if they were doing something wrong. And he got certain dreams from God about how one day he would rule his brothers, so he bragged about it to them. And they got annoyed with him. I don't blame them for getting annoyed with him. Though what they did is going a little bit too far. They jumped him, put him in a pit, were planning on killing him, but then they saw some slavers coming and said, we won't make any money if we just kill him. So they sold him into slavery and went down to Egypt. And that's where chapter 39 picks up. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph. And that is a very important thing. No matter what we're going through, the most important question is the Lord with us? Are we with the Lord? You know, Joseph did have certain bad attributes, and I won't shy away from it like most people will. But apparently, he knew the Lord. And after this point, you'll see how he faithfully serves the Lord through all of this. It's really amazing when you think about his situation. He's been taken far away from his family. Instead of being the favored son, he's a nobody, a slave. But God was with him. And he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had was put under his authority. So it was that from the time he had made him overseer of his house, and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and did not know what he had, except for the bread which he ate. So, at this point Joseph was at his lowest. God was with him. You know, people trying to give lessons on how we should work as Christians. You know, which is basically at a job we're supposed to do all those things like the Beatitudes, be merciful and loving and fruit of the Spirit, all that. We're supposed to have that while we're on the job as well as when we're off the clock. And a lot of them will talk about Adam, who was working in the Garden of Eden under the best boss that ever was, before work was cursed. That's not the example to follow. This is the example to follow, Joseph. He's in a terrible situation. He didn't even choose his boss. I mean, nowadays, no matter how bad of a job you have, you applied there. You applied there, you agreed to work there. And there is something that's keeping you going back. And that something is not the fact that if you run away, they will kill you or put you in prison. Joseph was working as hard as he could, and he found favor. God was with him. God was with him. He's a very good example of work ethic and how to deal with these situations, because he had every excuse to just sit there crying and moaning, throwing himself a pity party over a terrible thing that had happened to him. But instead, went to the Lord and he did his job. And God blessed. However, that isn't the end of Joseph's story. Yeah, this is a story that really is a great illustration of how God works everything for the good to those that love God and who are called according to his purpose. You know, you go back to the dreams that Joseph had. He dreamed he would be ruling, even over his brothers, his family. And if he had just stayed as a successful servant in Potiphar's house, he wouldn't have ended up in the position he dreamed of, that God had shown him. And all things work together for the good, but not everything that happens to you is good, and something very bad is about to happen to him. It says, now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. It's at the end of verse 6, now in verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, lie with me. Potiphar's wife, his master's wife, is trying to seduce him, looking with longing eyes at him. Verse 8, but he refused. As well he should have. Some people, they're not thinking of the Lord, not thinking of morality of the Lord, not thinking of anything but they can claim any reason they want, but just their own lust. Might say, I better go along with what she wants. But he didn't try making himself excuses for that. No. He knew God didn't want him to do that. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? You know, nowadays people think that if you have an impulse to do something, that makes it right. If you want to do something, it must be right. And that's the only thing I can come up with for all the stuff that is praised in today's society, encouraged in today's society, is just, if you want to do something, it must be right. Because after all, people never want to do something wrong. But Joseph knew better. He knew that was wrong, and he didn't do it. He's called sin what it is. It's sin. It's wickedness. And he mentions what a betrayal that would be. Potiphar trusted him and raised him up. He didn't start out as the head slave, as the head servant, but now he's in a good position. His life wasn't so bad. And he's not going to betray this. So in verse 10, so it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her to lie with her or to be with her. So she didn't suggest it one day and he said no, and she left it at that. She harassed him. She was always after him. And he consistently refused. You know, a lot of people will serve God for a short time and then walk away from God. They may have refrained from a certain sin that has them trapped for a little while, and then they return to it. Or they may get they may at some point decide, I've been refusing to do this, but maybe I'm being cheated. And then try. But not Joseph. Not Joseph. He was very consistent with this. He was consistent with his work, with the way that he lived his life, and with his resistance to this woman. Verse 11. But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, so all alone, that she caught him by his garment, and saying, Lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. The Bible says there's a way of escape out of every sin. You're not out of every temptation. There's a way of escape. Joseph found it and ran off. However, in verse 13, and so it was when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, See, he has brought in to us a Hebrew to mock us. He came to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. Talk about a scorned woman. This woman who one minute is trying desperately to seduce him and has been doing it for day after day, week after week, whoever knows how long. All of a sudden, she turns around and accuses him of trying to rape her. And that the only reason she wasn't raped is because after she screamed in terror that he ran off. And she has the evidence, his garment. Verse 16, so she kept his garment with her until his master came home. So Potiphar comes home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, The Hebrew servant whom you brought. The blame game is not a new thing. The blame game is all the way back in Genesis chapter 3, and this is a lot of years after that. So she's blaming him. The Hebrew who you brought to us came in to me to mock me. So it happened as I lifted my voice and cried out that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So how does a husband act if somebody tried to rape his wife? Doubly so if it was someone he trusted. Only fault I can see here is him believing his wife. But that's kind of normal for a husband to believe his wife. Guess he didn't know what she was. I feel sorry for him having a wife like that. So verse 19, so it was when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, Your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in the prison. Could you imagine this? Something that always has amazed me is looking at how one day or 1 minute can completely change somebody's life, for good or ill. I mean, that morning Joseph is high up in that house, doing pretty well. And before that day is over, he is in a prison, accused of attempted rape. His boss, who liked him before, hates him. But verse 21 says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." So the Lord is still with Joseph, even going through this. And Joseph is still faithful to God. I mean, this might have been my point. Maybe the last straw would have been just being sold into slavery. But he sold into slavery, betrayed by his brothers. But okay, it's working out. It's working out. He's doing okay. But then this happens. Everything he worked for, gone. And he's the lowest of the low. You wouldn't really blame him if he gave up at that point. He said, forget God. What's God done for me? Got me put in here? A lot of people will blame God. They'll blame God even if they get caught doing something that they really did do that was wrong. They'll blame God for getting them in that situation. But here, he's an innocent man. He didn't blame God. He continued trusting in God. Continued serving God. I mean, I really think is an incredible character to show that he kept his faith in God through all this. Verse 22, "And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper." So once again, he is trusted by the keeper of the prison. God put favor on him. As he was faithful to God, God was faithful to him. God was faithful to him always. And so he's still in prison. But he's in charge of his little group there. And the guard trusts him. Move on to chapter 40. Because you might have noticed that he's still not ruling over his family. "And it came to pass, after these things, that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt," the Pharaoh, "offended their lord, the king of Egypt, and Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, so they were in custody for a while." So the chief baker and the chief butler, who personally served Pharaoh, were thrown in prison. Don't think it ever says exactly why they were put there, but they were. Verse 5, "Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream, both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came into them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad." I don't know, he's more observant than I am. If I'm in the prison and I see that the people with me are sad, I would say they're sad because they're in the prison. Like I am. Like I would be, But he's more observant and more caring. He's looking into someone else's matter. He says, verse 7, "So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his lord's house, saying, 'Why do you look so sad today?' And they said to him, 'We each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it.' So Joseph said to them, 'Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please.'" I mean, Oh, you had a bad dream, huh? Well, let me tell you what happened to me. You know, he doesn't go and tell them why he is upset, because with God's help, he's not. So he says, tell me the dreams. So verse 9. Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, behold, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. It was as though it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and presented them and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. So that's an interesting dream. Wonder what he ate last night before going to bed. But verse 12. And Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Now within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, according to the former manner when you were his butler. So that's what it means. Then Joseph makes a request in verse 14. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing here that they should put me into the dungeon. So he makes a request here. You know, he knows this guy's going to be brought out and go before Pharaoh, so please mention me to Pharaoh. Please get me out of this place. Verse 16. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and there were 3 white baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. I don't know how I'd feel about wearing a hat that birds are eating everything out of. That would be disturbing. So Joseph answered and said, Joseph seemed a caring person, so he probably wasn't as anxious to give this interpretation. Doesn't say here. But he answered and said, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from you. I kind of like the first interpretation better, the first dream. How would you feel if you were that guy? I mean, 3 days. Could you imagine that? You're sitting in the prison for 3 days, hoping beyond hope that Joseph is wrong. Verse 20. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. So, yay! The chief butler is gone. And so Joseph is telling himself, all right, I ain't going to be here very much longer, because that guy, he is going to mention me to Pharaoh. I'm getting out of here. Any day now. Verse 23, yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Read one more line from chapter 41 in verse 1. Then it came to pass at the end of 2 full years. Not going to read beyond there. But I will just say that 2 years later, I'll find Joseph is still serving the Lord faithfully, still doing his job there. For 2 years, I mean, I could imagine. How long did it take till he gave up and said the butler ain't gonna help me? You know, every day he gets up. Wonder if this will be my last day. But even when we're disappointed, even when things don't work out the way we wanted, what do? People will get upset over the smallest things. Blame God. Stop serving God over the smallest thing. You didn't get that promotion, or you got this difficulty. You had car trouble. Joseph went through a lot more than you probably have. And he served God faithfully through it. And through it all, God brought him through. So, the challenge to us is to go and do likewise. To trust in God, no matter what's going on. To faithfully serve Him. Do what God wants us to do. Even when it seems like no matter what we do, something goes wrong. Just got to keep trusting in God. Faithfully serving Him. He'll fulfill His promises. And He will be with you. Hope this has been a blessing. If it has, please like this, share, subscribe, comment. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any comments or questions of us, we'd love to hear from you. So please do talk to us. There's the comments. There's on our website we've got phone number, email address, different ways to contact us. We'd love to hear from you. So until next time.